And boom, welcome back to the what is it called? The Reckoning Brothers podcast.
It doesn't
We
roll.
spell it weird, so it's hard for me to pronounce it because there's a W on the beginning.
What do we do here?
Well, right now, today, we're on part 3 of me learning all this really cool stuff about Mark's past.
And you've known me for
Because we've been
25
friends
years,
for like 22 years and I haven't heard this shit.
a quarter of a
You,
century, Scott. You were just a
you,
wee lad when I met you.
I was a wee lad. I was stupid, but you know,
No,
now I'm slightly less stupid,
you were a
and
little
that's in no small part thanks to you.
you were a good kid. You were the little brother I never wanted. You and Josh both.
Eh, And you were the older brother that I never wanted, but we're happy that you're here.
No,
And when we
yeah, no, where we left off, I, and I don't. None of us want to spend too much time on my biography, but you had asked about how I started with Reagan, etc. And the lead into that was we want to have an interesting podcast where we think we're interesting people, and we want to talk about interesting things. Um, and where I left off was so I get
here,
to watch. No,
Mark is I just want people to know you're a little bit old, but that's fine because we're all going to get there someday. And dude, I'm 42 and my mind slips left and right and I feel it coming. Shit hurts when I wake up in the morning that shouldn't hurt.
and I was trying to decide.
I'm on my way.
I was trying to decide how to continue, like, because I have so many great stories about Ronald Reagan and the Reagan years. So during the campaign, and you'd asked me about winning the election and stuff, and I got to California. I'm working for Reagan, typing out press releases every day. After the convention, the campaign headquarters moves to Washington, and I told the Bill Casey story that happened in Washington. So during the campaign, my parents, I would talk to my parents like maybe once a week. Back then, they had what was called Watts lines, and Watts lines were 800 numbers, but they were also called. I can't remember what Watts stood for, but it was the precursor to like like everything 800 is free now.
Mm.
Back then, a Watts line, like you had to pay so much a month, right? It'd be like a flat rate, and you could.
So you paid in, but everybody that called the 1-800 number didn't have to pay, unlike a 1-900
Correct,
number,
but
correct?
but the campaign got a bill once a month
Got it.
from the phone company, which there was only one phone company back then. It was AT&T. That was it, right? So I'd call my parents on the Watts line,
Ass titties and titties.
right, and I would say, and as the election gets closer and closer, and I really didn't think Reagan had a chance. He was behind in the polls the whole way. Even it started to really get close after the debate because Reagan destroyed Jimmy Carter in the debate, and um, my mom and dad kept telling me, especially my mom, my parents were very worldly, very smart people. I'm this 18-year-old kid. I turned my birthday's in December. So I turned 19 like a month after the election, right? So during the transition, and I got promoted, me and the guys I hung out with that had all sweated, we were the young Reaganites, um, that had sweated balls and worked our asses off for Reagan, all got promoted and all went with a transition team. I worked for the Office of the President elect and the Inaugural Committee, and I got a director's position. And we all got a raise because the FEC, now when the FEC releases money, because the FEC releases, the FEC has a bank account that they release money to the Office of the President elect so that they can have offices and stuff. That doesn't come from campaign. Campaign funds don't pay for the office. That's the FEC government money pays for it. And back then it was like $2 million. Now it's probably 847 million. Who fucking knows, right? So everybody got a raise, the shit campaign money. And when I would talk to my mom and dad, I'd say, well, if we win the election, I'm gonna be with the transition. I'm gonna go to the White House. And my mom kept saying, well, don't get your hopes up too high because I don't think that anybody 19 is going to get a job at the White House, which was kind of a downer to hear it. And
It's
I kind of,
pragmatic, though. It's what she
yeah,
probably should have
it was
said,
very
right?
pragmatic, right? So about a week and a half before the inauguration, and I sent FedEx was a brand new company then. I FedExed my mom and dad because I worked at the inaugural committee. I got VIP tickets. Fuck yeah. So I sent my mom and dad VIP tickets to the swearing in, VIP tickets to the inaugural ball, VIP tickets to the inaugural gala, the whole shebang, and
Mm.
and airplane tickets, right? And at the swearing in was biblical because it was rainy and cloudy and cold, and like the moment Reagan puts his hand on the Bible, the sky cleared. It was literally a biblical scene, right? As he's taking the oath of office, the rain stops, the sun comes out, and the incoming national security advisor, who was a friend, somebody I'd worked with during the campaign, and it kind of fatherly figure to me and the guys that I hung out with, me and my best friend in Washington, David Ford. So he's walking down the little aisleway and he's whispering to some of us. And the whisper was, you see, there were 52 American hostages in Iran. The Iranians, during the Carter administration, the Iranian hostage crisis had lasted 444 days. The Revolutionary Guard took over our embassy. They took American hostages. Jimmy Carter couldn't do anything, couldn't get anybody out. They had a failed rescue mission. All the helicopters that were sent on the rescue mission crashed in the fucking desert. It was a huge debacle and one of the worst foreign policy catastrophes in history, the Iranian hostage crisis. And
But it led to such a good Ben Affleck
there,
movie.
yeah, it did. And the Iranians were scared to fucking death that the President-elect Reagan, the first cable he sent as president-elect was to the Iranian regime, and it was like a one-sentence cable, and it said, "The president-elect views the taking of an American embassy as an act of war, and it will be dealt with accordingly." Right? It's like Reagan was kind of like Trump in a way, like before when Donald Trump was building skyscrapers in New York, you didn't want to fuck with the guy, right? And it was a kind of muscular diplomacy that the Carter administration didn't have, kind of like the non-muscular diplomacy that the current administration doesn't have. And so they released the hostages at right before Reagan gets inaugurated because they're scared to fucking death. And the incoming national security advisor is walking and he's whispering. He whispers to three people down from me. I forget who it was. He gets to me and he leans down and he whispers and he goes, "The hostages are getting on an airplane. They'll be home. They're on their way home." And my father, the fighter pilot for 30 years, right? And I'm like in this position to tell my dad something. My dad, who had a top secret clearance for I don't know how long. And I leaned over and I whispered to my dad, I said, "The hostages are getting on a plane. They're on their way home. And the hostages are being released." And my dad looks at me and he goes, "How do you know?" And I went, "Hello, Dad," right?
Hmm.
Like, who the fuck got you this VIP, right? Which is great. We went to the inaugural ball, and Tony Bennett was singing. The president and Mrs. Reagan were dancing. I went out on the dance floor and I asked Ronald Reagan if, and I call people were still calling him governor. Everybody was so used to calling him governor, and I think I said governor. I said, "Governor, will you dance with my mom, and 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 have Mrs. Reagan dance with my dad?" And he said, "Yes, he would." And Tony Bennett, I forget what song Tony Bennett was singing, but um, so I called my mom and dad over, and you know, Mrs. Reagan starts dancing with my dad. And my mom is dancing with the president of the United States, and she's about ready to faint. And it was my dig at my mom for all those phone calls when she was like, "Don't get your hopes too high. I don't think anybody's going to hire a 19-year-old to work in the White House." And I'm like, my mom looks at me and she's like, like dumbfounded. And I mouthed it to her. I went, "Don't get your hopes up too high, Mom," while she's dancing with the president, which was fucking great. Because I got the digging at my mom. So
Amazing. Dude,
yeah,
I love that story. I am so happy that you were able to do all of that. But the
I was
real weird part of that to me
yeah.
is I had no idea FedEx was that new of a company that only came
It was a
around in
new
the
company then.
1970s.
I couldn't tell you how new, like whether or not they were 6 months old or a year old, but they were new, and it was like like the incoming administration was like, yeah, um, got a lot wanted. There was no such thing as an overnight mail service back then.
Here's something I always wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
The coolness factor of Trump right now, I guess by always, I mean for the past month or two. The coolness factor of Trump. It feels like young people like him. It feels cool. It feels like the end. Leftism is just not cool anymore. It's just done. It's lamer than fucking lame, right? And I'm sure that's how the young people feel if they have a finger on a pulse and a brain. Was it that way back then? Did it feel like leftism was done
Oh
and
yeah.
that
And
conservatism, not
yeah,
conservatism even, but like
well, in
Reaganism
Reagan,
was on the
you
rise?
know, I mean, in Reagan, I mean, all you had to do was look at the guy. I mean, the
Mm,
guy was, he'd been an actor who's a movie star, handsome, rugged. Well, the guy wrote, he, he had a ranch. He lived on a fucking ranch. He raised fucking horses. The guy
so
rode
hard.
horses. He didn't play
Oh
golf.
yeah, it's like a monument to.
Like
I
if
live
you,
out here. Like Simi Valley is like half of this fucking city is a monument to
the
Reagan.
White
Like
House,
he's got
but
the Reagan Library, his ranch.
the
It's
White
a
House
whole
press corps
thing.
hated it because they didn't like the fact that the imagery of him at the ranch, like when he would spend the weekend at the ranch or go to the ranch for a couple of days or whatever, like you know by comparison, Jimmy Carter went to his peanut farm in Georgia, right? Biden goes to that
Peanuts are fucking
right. Biden goes
gay.
to that stupid house.
Cashews are where it's at.
Yeah, Biden goes to that beach house he has in Wilmington. President Obama went to where did he go? Yeah, Martha's Vineyard,
Yeah,
right?
Martha's
Reagan,
Vineyard.
Reagan's
Lame.
well, Rancho del Cielo means ranch in the sky because
Mm.
the Reagan Ranch has like every topography there is. It has beachfront, mountains, meadows, rolling hills, and Reagan worked on his ranch. Like he'd go out and chop wood, and and wade out into his pond and pull up the pond weeds and heave them up on the shore and ride horses and jump fences with his horses. And
A
the press,
lot of that was a lot of that legit.
oh, it was all
Like,
legit,
hmm.
all of it. Like they tried to like portray it as like the Reagan White House scripted no, that wasn't, none of it was scripted. Like you can, I mean,
Makes sense.
if you just Googled images Reagan on horseback, you could see that none of it was scripted. Like
Hmm.
the guy genuinely loved horses, and and really, he would have been happy to have remained a retired former two-term governor of California, retired actor, and spent the rest of his life on his ranch. He did not, and and he
Trump
parallels that.
did,
He
Trump
parallels
echoes to
that
that,
with
right?
Trump,
Yeah,
right? Like
he
Trump
kind
would
of
be,
echoes to that.
yeah, he parallels that with Trump. Like Trump would be perfectly happy like living in his golden tower, playing golf on the weekend, and having a great time. He doesn't need to work, right?
I still feel I mean
So
I
you're
don't
right
know a
about
lot about Reagan, but I feel like with Trump, it's there is that calling, but there's also the narcissism, which is the
oh
way
the
I
guy's
feel. The older I get, the more I'm just the narcissism is just if that's the fuel you need to do something good, whatever,
the
whatever,
ego.
that's fine. Be
No,
full of yourself.
and that's where
That's
the two
cool.
and that's where the two are extremely different because Reagan really had he was like an egoless man.
Really interesting.
He had no ego at all. Like he really didn't care what people thought of him. He did like with friends and family, but and he felt good that the American people loved him, but he was just like a hail fellow, well met. If you've ever heard that expression, he was just the
No,
nicest man, right?
pretty sure you just made it up. But Josh has given us the look. He's given us the look, Mark. You know what that means.
Hi, Daddy.
It means cheers, and I'm finishing my drink right now.
It was good to see you
Dude,
guys,
it's good to talk to you. Always is. I really liked that those stories that you told, and we'll hit it up again here soon.
and yeah, I'll see you on Thursday night from
Boom,
Josh's
boom.
house.
Sounds good. Later,
All right.
man.
Good night. Good night,
Bye.
everybody.